about to hear a story that, like so many other paranormal tales, is hard to believe. But it happened to me and deeply affected my life. As unbelievable as it sounds, it's true, and I experienced it firsthand. I'm not expecting you to believe it, especially if you've never had a paranormal encounter yourself. For 8 long years, I worked as a nurse at a hospital that seemed to have a life of its own. When I first started, I didn't believe in the supernatural. But my experiences changed that forever. It all began on my first night shift. I remember making my rounds and approaching the VIP room, only to feel an invisible force preventing me from entering. I stood there, staring inside, unsure of what to do. Summoning all my courage, I finally forced myself into the room, spoke to the patient, and quickly exited. I tried to mask my unease. It was my first day, and I didn't want to seem odd. Thankfully, the VIP room remained empty after that night, and I almost forgot about the incident. One night, as I was working on a report at the nursing station, I saw a short man approaching. I assumed he was a family member staying overnight. Standing up to greet him, I asked, "Sir, how can I help you?" To my shock, there was no one there. The nurse beside me noticed my confusion and asked where the man went. I swore I had seen him, but he vanished. When I mentioned it might have been a ghost, she laughed, until all of a sudden, all the files on the shelf dropped to the floor. My coworker, with fear, turned back and loudly said, "I am sorry if I offended you. You do exist." Another night, as I sat at the station with another nurse, we kept hearing the elevator open and close, followed by footsteps. Each time, I checked, but there was nothing. The first time I returned, the other nurse's face was pale with fear. I suggested it might be a ghost, and she asked if I believed in them. I admitted I did. She then shared that she once went to the nourishment room, located slightly below our floor, to get food for a patient. She often saw a doctor in a white lab coat who would hide behind the shelves as soon as she spotted him. She didn't think much of it until she mentioned it to other nurses. They told her that it was the spirit of a doctor who had died years ago. He used to go to the nourishment room for food while he was working there, and they believed his spirit still lingered. After that, she never went there alone. During my shifts, I witnessed numerous inexplicable activities along with other staff. In the VIP room, dubbed the not too friendly room by our supervisor, the TV and water faucets would turn on by themselves. We always went in pairs to turn them off. One night, one of the nurse aides decided to test the belief that the doors opened by themselves. She claimed that if she closed the doors, they would be open within 15 minutes. That night, we only had a few patients, so most of the rooms were empty. She closed all the doors, and to our surprise, when we went to check on them, all the doors were open. My biggest fear was going to the cafeteria in the basement, directly above the morgue, to get food at 12:30 a.m. Despite pressing the basement button, the elevator often took me to the morgue. One time, the doors opened, revealing an old janitor standing by a bucket. He didn't look at me or try to enter, he just stood there as the doors closed and took me to the cafeteria. One time, I went to the restroom on the cafeteria floor. The restroom had 3 stalls, and I checked to see that all were empty. I chose the last stall. As I entered, I suddenly heard napkins from the electronic dispenser start to fall. I heard the dispenser turn on. Rushing back out, I saw a pile of napkins on the floor and caught the dispenser still working. As I approached, it abruptly stopped, and immediately, the faucet started running. I forgot all about using the restroom and hurried back to my floor, my heart pounding in my chest. Despite the fear, I grew accustomed to the hauntings. They became a part of the hospital's nightly rhythm. However, one incident still haunts me to this day. One night, they asked me to work on the other haunted floor, the long-term acute care, LTAC, floor, as they were short-staffed. For those familiar with this floor, most of the patients are unable to move. I started my shift, took my rounds, and as soon as I went back to the nursing station, a patient in one of the rooms called me. I entered the room, not wanting to disturb the patient, so I didn't turn on the light. I asked how I could help, but received no reply. Assuming the patient had gone back to sleep, I returned to the station. Almost immediately, the call bell rang again. I went back to the room, and again, no reply. This happened 5 times. Each time, I would enter the room, and each time, I got no response. On the 6th call, I decided to take the call button away from the patient. I thought it might be placed under him, causing it to go off whenever he moved. I entered the dark room again and reached for the call button, expecting to find it near the patient. To my surprise, the wire led away from the patient, ending on a table far from his reach. Panic set in. I rushed out of the room, my heart pounding with fear. As I exited, one of the nurses saw me rushing out. She grabbed my arm and asked what was wrong, but I was out of breath and couldn't speak. Ignoring my obvious distress, she dragged me back to the dark room despite my attempts to resist. "Why did you run out?" she demanded, but I still couldn't catch my breath enough to explain. We returned to the nursing station, and I collapsed onto the floor, trying to regain my composure. The nurse told the others with a smile, "You should have seen her, she was running out of the patient's room like she saw a ghost." Anger surged through me. "You idiot, I did see a ghost," I yelled. I explained the situation, my voice trembling as I recounted the eerie events. The nurse's smile faded, replaced by fear. "Why didn't you tell me?" she stammered. "Why?" I replied, "You didn't give me a chance. I was in shock, and you dragged me back in there despite my resistance." After that, the patient did not call again. That night was the last straw. I resigned from my job and decided to change careers. The constant fear and inexplicable experiences were more than I could handle. The hospital had taken its toll on me, filled with restless spirits and unnerving encounters. I knew I needed to find peace away from the haunted halls and shadowy figures. Some things are better left unexplained, and for me, that meant leaving the supernatural behind for good. I need to mention that the hospital where I worked was famous for its paranormal activities. My colleagues all had eerie experiences. I personally believe that most of the people working at the hospital, in one way or another, had their own paranormal encounters.